Today we have a very special guest, one of my absolute guitar heroes, Mr. Steve Eagles of Blurt, of The Photos, of Satan's Rats, of Bang Bang Machine. The man has had quite an extraordinary career, and music to my ears, they're actually going to be recording new music with Blurt. So, Mr. Eagles, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi there, Jeff. How are you doing?
Great here. One of my primary focuses here was to focus on an album that I found back in 1987 in Orlando, Smoke Time. One of the most intriguing band setups I'd ever seen. While I'd like to focus on your style, particularly in Blurt, given that it's so radically experimental and today's music is so geared, a lot of guitarists are gearing toward that direction. I wondered if you might synopsize your band history, given that you've had the record deal and the chart success and kind of the different contexts from punk and pop to goth and indie.
Well, I came out of the punk thing and then the post-punk thing, and then I came across Blurt. I saw them play in a place called the Hope and Anchor in Islington, London. Not many people there, but I went down with some friends, and it was extraordinary. Never seen anything like it. And everybody I went down there with, we all became fans. You know, we were really, really hit over the head by this thing called Blurt. I mean, when they walked on stage, one of our friends, he just pointed and he went, "They're old men." Because they were, like several years older than us. We were just kids. But they blew us away. They got into this trance thing. And then we moved from the bar towards the stage. And we were like moving, and then we started screaming. This is like this trance thing. With the loop guitar and the tribal like drums. And then Ted Milton's kind of mad saxophone playing and he's kind of shouting, And it was, in those days, it was a very aggressive show, a Blurt show. And then we found out that they had made this album called Blurt in Berlin, a live album. And we all got a copy of that and realized that Ted Milton's words, were really special. This guy, he's a mad poet, absolutely fantastic words. And I got to know him, became a friend of his, because he lived in a town called Stroud, which wasn't that far from me, in the Midlands, in the UK. And me and another friend, we would drive there and hang out, drink whiskey, listen to Sun Ra, stuff like that, stuff that I'd never been exposed to. And then at some point in 1984, my previous band, The Photos, had split up, and he'd fallen out with his guitar player, Pete Crease, and asked me if I would do some dates, Would it be possible, said that, another guitar player could come in and do what his previous guitar player was doing. And I said, well, let's give it a go. So I kind of half learnt the riffs, and we did some club dates, and Ted was completely ecstatic because he realised that another player could come in and do the parts. So that's how it started, and then eventually we did a bit of recording. White Line Fever EP was the first thing I did with Ted, and I just had to play a cyclical riff that was odd, that wasn't normal.
Right.
lock in with the drums, and then he could do his stuff over the top, and that's basically what we still do now.
It's, people have said it's minimalist playing, and yet it's really kind of huge because it's a, three-piece ensemble. It's sax, drums, guitar, and at the time you were doing, in the mid to late '80s, certainly the gear wasn't there. Maybe some of the precedent was there if you're talking back to Henry Cow and Fred Frith or Derek Bailey. There's experimental guitar, Elliott Sharp, and all that. And you had come from again, kind of a pop punk. If you go back to, I was just watching the 1980 performance on Look Here with the photos, and you're playing, rock style. To go into this context with Blurt, you're playing these, whether it's like a 3 or 4 note riff or just some kind of chord splashes, you're doing it, as I could kind of hear, with very minimal effects. I just wondered how you kind of built that sound and transitioned yourself from that, more traditional, if you would, pop punk context into this, very open environment where it's controlled, but it's not controlled.
Well, I was never influenced by those people, like Fred Frith. Who else did you say? Robert Fripp. I'd never heard those players. So nobody influenced me, only what was required for it to work within Blurt. So I just kind of came up with riffs and textures that I thought Ted would like, and he would tell me, in rehearsal or whenever. He said, I like that, I like that. No, I hate that. And we came to some kind of artistic, agreement. And I mean, if there was something I really hated, then I would just junk it, But if we all liked it, then fantastic. And we worked very quickly. Everything was written on the spot. Write it and then record it. There was never any, we've got this idea that we've been working on for months. That never happened. It was always very instant. So the sound evolved a little bit the more I got into effects. I mean, I've always liked effects. I used to have a Wem copycat and an Echoplex and various choruses and flanges and stuff, And I used to like playing with delays as well, especially in a live sense, because the drummers we've had have always been really good. Very, their timekeeping was impeccable. So if I set up a delay, it would work really well, And in more recent years, I came across this thing, which is called a Yamaha Magic Stomp. Yeah. So you kind of program in all these effects, and it's just like using a Stopbox. There's a album which I think which is called Discordant Skies, and I just went through a load of presets and just used them, on each number.
All in that one. How did you decide on that one versus, because there's so many of the huge pedal boards? Is that just part of the whole minimalist aesthetic, or just convenience?
Convenience, because when we tour, we don't take any roadies or anything. We take all our stuff on our back. We get on a train. We don't use a van, especially around Europe. and everything has to be in a bag about that size. All my equipment, leads, amps always supplied at every gig. So the Magic Stump, as it's only that big, is absolutely fantastic. And a couple of other pedals. That's the reason, convenience.
Sure, for sure, for sure. Speaking of the gear and Beneath Discordant Skies, in the centerfold of the CD here, I see you've got, it looks like a familiar guitar. I think that might have been the one that you've been using for almost 40 years now. Is that
The guitar I used throughout Satan's Rats and the Photos is a John Birch guitar made in, he was a Birmingham guitar maker. And he used to make these guitars which had just one piece of wood, so they were really solid. You couldn't break them really. And I had two. I had this kind of brown burst one which I used because it was a better guitar. It had a better sound, and played a little bit better. But I had a backup which is a green burst one. In southern Germany on a Blurt tour in about 1986, it got stolen, the brown one, and so when we got back, I picked up the green one and just carried on with that. And that's one I still use that one. It's got a kind of a very wooden tone, it just seems it's good for Blurt anyway. I don't think I would use it for anything else.
What's the control layout on it?
Oh, they're just normal volume and tone controls, and there's one little anti-phase switch or something.
Okay.
Gives it a sort of plinky plonky sound. I don't use that much.
Oh, interesting. Okay. You actually hosted, or you opened for the Sex Pistols. What's it like at that time? Is it really that aggressively anti-rock?
They were doing a secret gig. I think they called the tour Spots on Tour. The Spots Tour, Sex Pistols on Tour. Supposedly secret, which of course it wasn't. But we opened for them in this club in Wolverhampton, called the Wolverhampton Lafayette Club. It was mad, just completely mad, really insane. But it was great for us. We did our spot, got an encore, which was amazing. We could easily have been canned off, but we didn't. Anyway, they came on, and I thought they were fantastic, really fantastic. Even though Sid was playing on bass, I don't think his playing was that good, but who cared, The power of the band was amazing.
Did you identify more with the punk side of things, or Satan Rats morphed into the Photos? It was a bit more accessible, let's say, music that you were doing. I mean, how did you kind of make that turn?
Because after 2 or 3 years of just thrashing around, the punk scene was great, really fantastic. It was a way in because you just formed a group, you put a few rehearsals together, and then you could get gigs. There was a club called Barbarella's in Birmingham, and I remember going up to see the Stranglers, and after the show had finished, the DJ said Barbarella's is hosting Birmingham's first punk festival in 2 weeks' time. Anybody who's got a band, just come up and see me. So I ran up to the DJ, gave him the name of our band, Satan's Rats, and 2 weeks later we were playing. That's kind of how easy it was. And then we got a couple of local guys who ran the local record store. They took on the management, and we ended up playing, all over the UK, different punk bands. It was a good time. But all that has to come to an end, you know, at some point. And when our singer left, we looked for a female singer because we wanted to be more, you know, maybe we could become a chart band or something. Maybe we could be more like Blondie than, you know, the Ramones, or maybe we could be a mixture of both, or something like that, you know. So that's how the photos came about.
After the photos, you had some chart success, you had the record deal and all that. Um, how do you then kind of shift gears uh, all around into you talked about how you saw Blurt perform for the first time. How do you completely change that the lane that you're in, if you will, and you talked about learning the riffs or kind of working into the style of that previous guitarist, Mr. Kreese, in Blurt, and kind of getting in that whole new creative mindset and changing gears with that kind of band. I mean, it seems like there's a pretty strong divide there.
Yeah, well, I think that comes about because one, I was really sick of the music business because when, you know, all the usual stuff happened, uh, I could write a book on what happened at that particular time, you know. It was just one thing after another. And I just really wanted to take a complete break from the music business as it was. And the offer to join Blurt gave me the chance to still play music, but there was none of this major record company stuff to deal with. We could, at the time, you know, get on a ferry, get over to Europe, and we could be touring for maybe 6 weeks, you know. And that's what we did. I thought that was fantastic. Really loved those days. And everything was just simplified.
It's
You just
possibly a
got
more
to a gig and played. You know.
sure. It seems like it's even more punk than the punk thing because punk.
Yeah. Yes, precisely. Yes. Uh, as far as the technically changing what I've been doing up to then, it was no problem because I liked what I was playing. It was completely different. Technically, it wasn't challenging. I mean, some people say to me, you know, how can you stand there and play the same riff for, you know, 8 to 9 minutes or longer? Because some guitar players say that they can't do that because they're too tempted to deviate from what they were playing, you know. So in order to make it interesting for myself, I use echo loops, uh, introduce different sound textures, you know, pedals basically.
Now you've got something like the Dither Quartet, which is four guitarists with significant pedals. The pedals have gone. I'm just looking at my a stack of books just on guitar pedals. The pedal. It's kind of become the craft beer industry. Everyone's making pedals all over the place. Your soundscape with very minimal effect, you make a big statement without overplaying, but it's huge, really.
We have a structure, and then we have improvised sections. So, I mean, if we go wrong, the audience never know. That's the good thing about that. We stay in time. Me and the drummer lock in, and then there are sections when we open out, you know. And so I'm not kind of tied down to one thing all the time. It can get really interesting. No two shows are ever exactly the same. And of course, a lot of what Ted is doing, you know, is improv. I don't know what you call it, free jazz.
Is it kind of a mutually agreed upon vision in terms of the songwriting? Or
It won't change, you know. Blue. it won't change in that respect. This album, Beneath Discordant Skies, it was deliberate policy to go into this little rehearsal room, and we would write 2 songs and we would record them, and then we would leave, and then maybe a few weeks later we'd go and do another 2. So we'd enter the room with no preconceived idea whatsoever. Ted would have some words on a big sheet of paper, and between the 3 of us we would just work something out. Maybe it might take us an hour to write it, and then 30 minutes to record it. A guy called Tim would come in with all this recording equipment, and then he would go away and mix it in his flat. And so we did about 5 sessions, 10 tracks or something, and that was the album. Cheap way of recording, but it was really in the spirit of what Blurt is all about.
Did you have a concern about continuity, kind of going, or was that kind of part of the thing to kind of capture a different moment each time you went into the studio, some sort of different vibe, if you will?
Yeah, as long as we didn't repeat ourselves, on the same album. Every track had to sound really quite different.
Do you have some ideas in the back of your head that you bring in, or is it completely in the moment?
It's in the moment. This other album that preceded Discordant Skies, it's an album called Cut It. Okay, and that was recorded that's the one. I was recorded in a completely different fashion. We went into a little studio, and I think we actually went and did separate things. I think the drummer just laid down some tempos. I just laid down some parts, and Ted and the engineer would mash it all up. It was just, like a cut it technique. Even though the cut it doesn't refer to the way we recorded it, that's exactly what happened. It was just cut ups and arranged into a song structure. And Ted would put the words over the top and some saxophone playing. And that's what we had for that album. And then when we went out to tour it, we had to just learn it and turn these studio generated songs into live performances. So sometimes we have to simplify things quite a bit, So that's the reason why we went back to first bass, which is going into a room and just making it up there on the spot. And to go one further, to actually record it about 30 minutes after we'd written it. That was for Discordant Skies. So 2 completely different recording processes between the 2 albums.
And in terms of kind of learning it, and particularly playing it live, how do you kind of stand out in the mix? Because, Ted is playing pretty wild, again, explosive saxophone. It's not a gentle instrument the way he's handling it necessarily. And you've got very precise, a rounded tone. Sometimes you've got a really staccato, mechanistic, machinistic kind of a thing going on. But how do you ensure that comes across in a live performance?
Well, it just happens. We very rarely rehearse. Very rarely. So if we want to put a completely new set together, then we might have to have a rehearsal. So we individually we've got an idea of what the parts are, and we make sure that we're tight when we go out and play. And then it's up to Ted to put his parts on. He'll know from memory that that there might be a particular riff, which he has to remember, and sometimes not. Where he can just improv. It's down to feel a lot of it. No other way to describe it, really. And it's certainly not rehearsed so that we're going to shout at each other. If somebody plays something which is supposedly wrong. We have some cues which we have to remember sometimes. Sometimes we don't remember.
Are you selecting your gear specifically outside of the Yamaha? It's got to be Fender and it's got to be something super clean for this.
Okay. My guitar setup, it has to be a clean amp. If the speakers are knackered and it's distorting, then I hate that, because if I want to add distortion, I'll add it, but I need a clean sound to start with. I usually ask for a Fender Twin, and sometimes I get a good one, and sometimes I get a really old one that's knackered. But I just have to go with whatever they're giving me. Sometimes I get a choice because they've got a basement or something with about 3 or 4 different amps. So we're constantly hauling them up and down these stairs, to find one that works okay. And the same goes for the drummer. He just brings along a bass pedal and some cymbals and a snare drum. Sometimes the kit falls apart midway. Happens a lot. Yeah.
Gear goes through a lot on the road. Do you ever write on the road or try something while you're, gig to gig? Do you say, someone comes up with something? Are you kind of creating on the fly?
Once or twice, something might come up in a sound check. Ted will say, "Yes, remember that, Steve." And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Occasionally, it can happen. Yeah.
And now you're actually going to be you're going down to London to record new music with Blurt this weekend, I believe, right?
Tomorrow, yes.
Awesome.
So I said to Ted, he said, "Can you come down on the day before the show?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to have a rehearsal because we haven't seen each other in 15 months, And he said, "Well, maybe not. I just want to do some recording, to do a single." Okay, so what we're going to do is go into the rehearsal room. Our friend Tim will be there, micing a few things up with this little, iPad or something that he controls everything from. And we'll write 2 numbers and we'll record the 2 numbers. And then somebody's going to put it out on a 7-inch vinyl. I think it's a company in Ireland or somewhere. So I've heard. And then on the Sunday, we'll do this show at the 100 Club. And maybe we'll get a chance to, play through a few numbers. Make sure we got the tempos right. And then we'll do it.
Have you been playing the songs kind of on your own, or do you, you don't even really need to do that at this point. They're kind of ingrained.
I listened to them a few days ago, and when I finish speaking to you, I'll be downstairs and I'll be going through them a little bit more, in depth. Make sure I've got all the riffs and all the magic stomp.
Okay.
Make sure everything planned in order.
How is the things are opening up now? Do you have any plans for any sort of maybe a smaller scale tour after the 100 Club, or is it too early to say what you're thinking right now?
It's too early. Yeah. I was real surprised that we were asked to do this show, you know, because I mean, there's always a chance it still might not even happen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Some new variant or other goes completely out of control, you know, then we'll be locked down again. So I don't know. It's 2 days away. I'm sure we'll do it.
In terms of you showed the Stopbox again. I just wonder how roadworthy is that? Is that the same unit you've been using for how long now? And does it pretty reliable?
Yeah, well, I've got two just in case. But they don't sell them anymore. And when I thought I should get a second one, I couldn't find one anywhere. But then a friend of mine said he'd got one and he didn't use it, so he sold it to me. So they're hard to come by, but I think they're great units.
Do you still kind of look at it there at the gear now? I mean,
there's too much stuff, and I sometimes hear these sounds, you know, and I think, wow, that's a great sound, you know, like Jack White, he's got some interesting things going on there. And then I look at the prices of these things, you know, and I think, wow, you know, that's a serious outlay just for a box, you know. But I like what I've got. It's compact and it's easy to use.
You've been teaching for a number of years now, and I just wonder, as you walk your students through the fundamentals, maybe just talk about the kind of students you have and what you tend to teach them if they come to you with ideas, and then how you teach them to kind of move on into the kind of open expression that you have been doing throughout your career.
Well, as far as teaching goes, I just do the standard thing. Teach them how to play the chords and to change chords quickly. And then if they're still interested, we'll get on to scales and then how to use the scales. And that's kind of, I've never had a student through the door that says, I really love what you do with Blurt. So I just do conventional teaching, you know. And, you know, most kids want to play rock stuff, you know, and then I get some people in who just want to play folk guitar, you know, acoustic stuff. So we do that, you know. I think for any young player, it's a really good thing to just try and play different styles. Have a go at everything. For me, during lockdown, I thought I'm going to really try and improve my jazz style. So listening to sort of John Coltrane sort of stuff and trying to do that on guitar, you know, that's what I've been interested in the last few months. So that when I sit down with the guitar, I just kind of do this jazz noodle thing, you know, improv thing. But we'll see how long that lasts, but that's what I'm currently into doing. But I've never had a student that wants to do that, for example, you know. It's really standard stuff that I teach.
Are you seeing it skew a little younger these days? You know, kids getting into it, or all over the age brackets?
Well, I teach kids from, you know, kind of about 9 years old. If they're any younger than that, forget it, because their attention span isn't there, you know. And I've got students who are, you know, in their 80s. You know, maybe they played years before and they want to pick the guitar up again, or maybe they just want to do something later in life. And so we go through usual things, you know, maybe they're big Bob Dylan fans or something, uh, or they like country music, or whatever. You know, I'll do my very best to help them play it.
And you're available on First Tutor, and I'll put the link down there. I can't wait to hear the new material. I know Blurt fans, there's a lot of, you know, there's still a lot of traction out there for the photos and for Bang Bang Machine. I was just looking at some of the comments on YouTube, and I'll put some videos in the video description here. So I can't wait for the new material, and thank you so much for your time, sir. And hopefully we can catch up maybe as things start to open up here, and you know, see how the new songs are coming out.
Okay, well, Jeff, you're very welcome.
Folks, anyone who is into the ambient, the experimental, you've got to check out Blurt. They never disappoint, that's for sure. Mr. Eagles, you kind of define a really great aesthetic for how to approach things in a fresh way and a really personal way. So thank you for all your work.
Well, thanks for that, Jeff. Thanks.
Have a great time. Be safe. Have a great show.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
See you.